people don't have much of a emotional vocabulary or like a way of understanding their own emotional needs or being able to relate to somebody else emotionally. The loneliness and the lack of emotional fluency is like crazy.
So yeah, I do think that like people on a social level really do just want to be revealing to someone, something, I guess.
I think one way to say it too is it's the unhealth of the collective social instinct.
Yeah. The big hormone enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 415, sexual self-pres, 458 Trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 Trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a 3-wing-4, self-pres social, 369 Trifix.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing-1, 963 Trifix.
If you like or hate us, make sure you go like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you leave us a review.
This is Big Hormone Enneagram, and we are having just another hang conversation episode. Doing some plugs. Please buy my book. Please rate and review my book. I think that if you want to help me out, I'm trying to figure out how to get my book into physical bookstores. And I am self-published through Amazon KDP, and the other service is called Ingram Spark. And so Ingram is this company that has distribution all over the world. And I believe, especially for the United States, but I think it's international, that if you want to help me out and support me, I think you can ask your bookstore to order my book through Ingram. And I think it gives them a big discount. I'm still trying to figure out if it's actually that simple. But laying it out there for listeners, just to, if you just want to humiliate yourself to some bookstore owner and
Do it.
order my book for me, that would be, that's something it'd be really exciting for me to see my physical book in a
Totally.
store, and I'm going
That would be
to get
cool.
my withdrawn ass out there probably tomorrow and try to do some of that. I also, so just planting seeds for stuff, Josh and I are with the Enneagram School. We've got that one course that's for sale. But we're going to do some intro courses just to have like intro material, so whether you want to get somebody that into the Enneagram and get them, get the basics down, or if you've listened to a bunch of podcasts, but you kind of want more of an organized way of approaching and systematically getting into the Enneagram, check us out. It's probably going to be in like August, September or sometime like that, still figuring things out. And then I've talked to 2 friends of mine who are Egyptian about potentially having our own Egypt trip. So
Nice.
Still no dates or anything yet. Probably like 12-ish days. My friends Lena and Diana, they're Egyptian, and they live in the States, and they've been doing their own kind of yoga themed Egypt retreats, and they know that I'm a huge nerd, so putting it out there for people to think about, considering December or January, and roughly thinking costs like $4,000, which sounds like it's a fuck of a lot because it is, but it's a good deal actually. And probably be on a boat on the Nile and other stuff like this. So, think about it, start saving money if you're interested. In a few episodes, I'll probably have like a place to find some actual info. And then, that's all I got for me. So,
All right.
I'll shut the fuck up.
DAA, Dark Arts Academy. You want to become dangerously perceptive and skilled at seeing the types clearly. We've been looking at the sexual instinct recently, looking at examples in TV and movies, and it seemed like a lot of you guys have been responding well to it and asked for more. So we've started looking at like each of the ways that the types are exemplifying their sexual instinct, and just it's becoming a whole thing. So check that out. You can get more information at enneagrammer.com. We have a Discord going for members, and we have discounts and perks. You can get that information at enneagrammer.com.
Nines.
David?
What do I have? Just Just continue to listen to my voice on this podcast. See me on DAA. I know I have a lot of diehard fans that just only like me and hate everybody else on this podcast. Trifix book is always available for people that need some of my juiciness and products. And
They always need
productivity.
Oh my God, David.
That's a great plug.
All right. And I, as usual, as per usual, you guys can find me at SaturnRuled9, the number 9.com for astrology readings, where I combine your astrological chart with your Enneagram type and help you see those sort of interweavings of both. That is SaturnRuled9.com.
And, Josh and Alexandra are having an attachment type support group. No dates or official info yet, but just keep your ears open.
It's just swirling.
Yeah.
Just swirling
it's
around.
going to be we're going to be pretty exclusive about it, actually. It is going to be attachment types only. It's probably going to be a very limited, we're going to keep it very limited. We're thinking August, again, no official dates yet, but it's real juicy stuff. So just be on the lookout for that.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Oh.
Do you have an Enneagram thing, or even just like a fun thing that's not like
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were considering doing the catfish thing.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Why were we even talking about that? We wanted to.
the reason, I brought it up at one point because it came up on like Facebook Watch. Do you have that guy on the app? Like
Yeah,
it comes
yeah.
up on my
Oh, yeah.
comes up, and I watched like a couple compilations, and I guess the algorithm just fed me more and more, and I, like a passive little baby bitch, just kept my mouth open. But what was fascinating was people would fall in love. You know what catfishing is, right,
Yeah.
David? Do you know
Yeah,
that?
I do. Yeah.
So, people would write into Neve and some other person, like, "Hey, I've been in love with this person for like 2 years. We talk every day, but they won't like Skype with me. They won't Zoom with me. They won't FaceTime. They won't anything. And I've only been able to talk to them on the phone once, but we're in love, and I just want to see if they're real." So they're like, "All right, let's make them meet." And sometimes it's actually a real thing, but most of the time, someone has fallen in love with another person who's like. There's a lot of people who are like, the one person is like straight, and then the person's gay, or lesbian or whatever, or it's like somebody that was just like they would not match in real life. There's a lot of times when there's scams. There's a lot of times when somebody is just indulging in some kind of like second life, like it's like playing a video game with somebody in a certain way, where they're just like have this whole fake persona. But what blew my mind about it was how people would fall in love based on really shallow, nothing exchanges. Like they would sometimes show on the show, like with the kind of exchanges they have, and it would just be more like, it wouldn't be deep conversations. It would be stuff like, "Good morning, babe. You got a meeting today. You're gonna kill it. Like, I believe in you. Good night, babe." It was surprising, but also not surprising at the same time, of how like it was so nothing that people would they'd be willing to move across country or send money or whatever it was. And it just got me thinking about like how shallow like most relationships are, and how little intimacy there is between people. And this show just showed me it's like it's so lonely, and just these like incredibly lonely people that very easily get hooked into doing stuff that's like pretty fucking far out, that if you're just watching, you're like, this is obviously a fake thing, and you shouldn't send this nude or whatever it is. So
Yeah, it reminds me of a Tinder swindler guy.
Yeah,
Right.
similar.
He was just doing the "how was your day," text every morning, and they would talk about themselves, and it just didn't seem like there was much going on. But I think I started to realize that that's kind of the type of low level blank attachment that people are looking for, because it doesn't pose any risk. It's just like a comfortable sense of mirroring that's not actually mirroring or intimate in any way. And that, as long as it's happening every day, though, as long as it's this sense of, oh, we're just pinging off of each other, we're not really saying anything or really connecting or really touching each other, but we're just there, it feels like a real connection. But then people just project a whole bunch of stuff onto that person. Because it seems like if you were actually individuating and actually sharing yourself, then you wouldn't be so attachable. You wouldn't be someone that people could just easily project on. And the fantasy would get ruined.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like specifically like an attachment type thing or anything like that, but it was just like observing some of these chats and stuff like that, like things that people base like pretty immense stuff on. It, whether they're an attachment type or not, is like pretty
That's true.
Extraordinary.
Yes.
And the kind of levels of disregard people will display about like people they're dating or whatever. It's like I don't know how to put my mind around it, but it was just really eye-opening that like it's a combination of what people will settle for, like the bare minimum that is required to create some kind of connection, in air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But then also like seemingly like the lack of emotion, like we've talked about how there's like maybe less heart center or something like that in the population. Maybe that's a part of it. Maybe that's my heart center bias, but it's like people don't have much of a emotional vocabulary or like a way of understanding their own emotional needs or being able to relate to somebody else emotionally. So it goes like through this like kind of side structure of familiar, or they're saying hi to me every morning or something. I don't know, but it's like the loneliness and the lack of emotional fluency is like crazy.
Yeah, I think most of it comes from a really profound deficit that most of the world is in, of connection, of affirmation, of mirroring, even just like basic attention. I feel a lot of us had, our first relationships like failed us, right? Our parents like failed us. Even if they didn't, they did. And then everything past that is kind of seen through the same lens of this person's going to fail me, or they are, and I'm having to settle this way, or they're not doing it, like all the different object relations. I think that's the starting point of all of this, is you find a person that is like in just a drought of connection, of seeing, of feeling like they are being, I don't know, like looked after by anybody, and then immediately it's not necessarily just an attachment thing. I think it's more like if you're in a drought and you get a little bit of something, it's going to seem a lot bigger to you.
I think one way to say it too is it's the unhealth of the collective social instinct.
Yeah.
And it relates into like stuff we've talked about relative to that book, Sex at Dawn, where it talks about, tribes of 100 people or so, where, each child has 3 or 4 or 5, 6 uncles because they don't know who the father is.
Yeah.
Because the woman has 3 or 4, 5 adult male lovers or whatever. And so we were evolved to have this communal thing where you're supported, you're looked after, and you've got all these different personalities too. If you think about it, you'd have the crazy uncle who's always joking around and harassing you, but it's funny, and you know what I mean, and you'd have the nurturing person, and and the strong person, and the disciplined person, and all of that stuff, and so it's partly the failure of just the 2-parent system where everybody's in a fucking box. Nobody talks to their neighbors. You can only rely on, the grandparents to occasionally come watch the kids, or a babysitter. There just isn't this active, continually, birds chattering kind of nonstop communication and interaction that makes you feel supported and held by a whole cast of characters.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's like like growing up in the 90s, it's like I grew up before iPhones were a thing.
Mhm.
And just the revolution of being able to swipe and get dates from the internet. Like you had to get someone's number and call them from a telephone, and then go meet, hoping that they would show up at a certain time at a place. I mean, so there's just so many unknowns,
Sure.
and so you had to actually talk to people, and so
Right. True.
you
Yeah.
actually had to have communication skills and go up to a girl that you were interested in and set
That's
up a
right.
date. And so now, all this catfish stuff is happening online. It's only possible because you're not face to face with somebody. You haven't seen them. You're not in a community with this person. They're not.
Right.
You don't know them through any sort of friends. And so we have all these options, but we're so isolated. We're all in our rooms staring at our phones with no social skills, and so we're so hungry for connection that if someone comes along and is pinging you every single day, that seems really significant. But back in the day, like you actually had to get on a phone and talk to them and potentially and meet up. Like it like life was about doing things in real life and not just sitting at home and on the internet. So things have changed so much, and it feels like we have way more options, but we're so isolated. So when someone comes along who gives us a little morsels of attention, it's something like this can happen.
Yeah, it's sort of like a shadow flood is going to happen, right?
Mhm.
You're going to flood towards that person, and it's going to be way too fast and way too much.
Yeah, I hear you about like phones versus before, but I also think like, I mean, look at our parents. Like they didn't develop any emotional skills at all.
That's true.
No,
Like,
that's true.
any communication skills. Like just thinking about all these different parents, and like I'm friends with a lot of older people through the Enneagram and stuff like this, and just like how many older people just like they have the appearance of looking older and wiser, but aren't, and don't know how to. It's like a lot of older people have just managed to find ways to live a life that is more isolated from things they don't want to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so so when we say like, hey, the thing you're posting seems like it's more this type than that type, it's like you are it's like a deep violation because they're not used to any kind of friction. And so
Mm-hmm.
part of relationships is tension and conflict, like even in any relationship, right? And so there's sort of this just erasure of confrontation of any kind. It's like, yeah, to David's point, like, I mean, you have like a nuclear family, and then if one or both parent works, there's not much time for the parents to relate to each other in a romantic, loving way, and then much less to relate to you as another child in that system.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, there's I don't know, there's no relating. And didn't you say, Emeka, one time that people tend to find their like long-term partnerships at work?
That's the most likely way. That it's not even close to the second option. Most people are dating people that they met through work because that's where we spend the most in our lifetime.
No.
People spend the most time with their coworkers, and it's a really depressing thing in
Super
this
depressing.
consumerist hellscape that we're in, that people spend more time with their coworkers than they do with their partners, and then they do with their family members, and they do with their friends. It's like, if you're not working with people you like, man, what a horrible fucking life that you're living.
So like, our favorite bar nearby is Doris, and it's a great bar, but like Alexander and I are always there joking how it seems like most of the population that goes there are like creative director, blah, 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 for some boring thing that's not creative or anything like that. There's like, it's like a certain vibe. And so it's kind of like, jobs like select for certain people, right? Like certain value systems and certain whatevers. And so, yeah, that's like all people getting together. It's just like, like, of course, there's no connection. Speaking of all these YouTube things too. Like, there's a channel called Soft White Underbelly. Have y'all seen that?
What?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Did you say
And
soft white underbelly?
yeah,
What is this about?
yeah, it is a
Sounds
guy
dark.
that go. It's a guy who interviews people, and I think he mostly focuses on Skid Row.
Mm.
He focuses on like, I mean, he'll just have an interview, and he barely asks any questions, and they just go off like gang members, prostitutes, drug addicts, sex
that's
offenders,
great.
people who've been preyed on sexually, like the darkest, worst shit you've ever heard of, and it's like hundreds of interviews, and I mean, it's like such a like the amount of suffering and all the stuff that goes wrong in people's lives, and so like, you know, it's like basically at the bottom of like so you know all these homeless people, right? And the cities in LA and other places trying to deal with homeless people, but part of how they cope with homelessness is through addiction, through drugs, and so there's all this addiction problem. Underneath the addiction is like typically combination of poverty, which you know equals bad childhood typically, you know, because the parents are unstable, and then lack of education, things like this. They're all like kind of the same thing, but what is really shocking, because they'll interview people who are like a rapist, they'll interview people who are sex offenders, not just the victims.
Wow.
And the people that have done these things typically have been molested as kids.
Wow.
And so that's another piece of this weird like privacy nuclear family kind of situation.
Right.
Where you know, like the lack of like kind of a publicness of things,
That's
I
right.
think contributes to some of this weird dark shit, and it's like it's really common.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
It's really common, and it just it's, you know, humans, the closest primates that humans
Resemble.
that resemble in parenting is gibbons that have like shared parenting. It's called
Right.
alloparenting, not like chimpanzees and bonobos, which is like, you know, so it's like this communal thing is so important and probably stops a lot of that dark shit.
Yeah, you could even say that that the sexuality, that underbelly sexuality, is partly or possibly, you know, again, the lack of the social contact. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so you're sort of again doing too much and sort of going at somebody to try to get connection and intimacy and so forth, because you don't have the tools, you don't have the skills to actually do it, and so it comes out sexually in like shadow sex.
And a lot of these people, like, I mean, it's kind of a cliche, and it's not at all to excuse it, but they did have like some kind of horrific abuse often, and so it's like that's associated, you know, like really intrinsically, and it's kind of interesting to see the responses of these people that have done horrible things, where they're like either taking account of it or like sort of trying to explain it to themselves of where it came from. Because there is this sort of like, what is this horror in me kind of quality that's like, you know, it's really, I mean, it's abyss black, but it's really interesting.
The people who are doing the catfishing, like, what's in it for them?
I've been wondering the same thing. I kind of think another part of this like phenomenon is that there's projection on both ends. Like both ends are kind of like, okay, the catfisher is kind of reaching into the abyss, unless they're like fully stalking this person and like fully knows them in real life or something like that. But I don't think that happens very often. But the catfisher seems to be reaching into the abyss, and the person being catfished is just responding to an abyss. You know, they have like a face, I guess, on either end that they're like projecting a whole personality and like landscape into. But I think the projection piece is like really, really big and important part of how this is possible at all. Because in a similar vein that we talked about with the Tinder swindler, you know, that guy had like the image of fortune and luxury and all that kind of stuff that is like a nice juicy hook for, certain people. But as far as his social component, he was also very blank and very minimal and kept things very basic. And I think that's an intentional part of this. Because if you get too specific, then that risks losing, that risks losing the connection. So I think the catfish almost has to be minimal and just has to keep it like, good morning, smiley face. Haha, what are you doing? Haha. So that the person being catfish can be like, oh my God, he cares so much. Now let me give you more specifics.
Well, I think also, or in that same line, a lot of the catfishers are unattractive and are worried that, they're trying to get somebody that they're attracted to talk to somebody they're attracted to.
Okay.
Want the attention from. And they can kind of imagine themselves as being the recipient of, if I was a desired person, this is the kind of attention I would get. And I can just pretend I can play something for a while.
Isn't it?
That's a good point.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these kind of more heartbreaking reveals where it's clearly the two people are very mismatched in attractiveness level.
Right.
Or one's just simply not going to be into the other, and the other one was afraid of rejection. Or it's, it's stuff maybe the attraction is a factor, but the bigger factor is, this woman has a bunch of kids and, wasn't going to get this kind of enthusiastic attention from this particular person if she believed if she revealed that she had 3 kids.
Okay.
I mean, isn't it also partly it's roughly the equivalent partly of, online edgelord, right? You're getting this feedback that you're this great something that you're not, and you're not having to do the work or whatever to get to some whatever status or level of talent or excellence or whatever, and you just get to be this character online and get super strokes and inflated from it.
You know what? I think I've found it for myself. I think, let's just say catfish is an extreme version of what a lot of people, or if not everyone's doing when they're dating, which is you're afraid that if the other person sees you, that they're not going to like what they see. So the initial stage of a relationship generally is people sort of dancing around each other, trying to shapeshift into what they think the other person's going to want. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of a feeling of, 6 months later, who the fuck is this person? Who is this person that I'm with? And so it's not just attachment types. Everyone, all the types have their own version of, in the early stages, you want someone to like you, you want someone to be attracted to you, and so you withhold information about yourself that you think might turn off the person, and maybe that gets revealed a few months later. Yeah, I think it's just fear of rejection. Also, just we're so starved for connection that when someone initially gives you that attention, that they're attracted to you, and on some level, maybe if they find out who I really am, they're not going to be into me anymore. That initial stage of, I don't want to be rejected, so I'm going to do and say whatever I got to do to keep this person liking me.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. And digital shit lets you keep that front up more than ever. Yeah, it's this combination of fear of rejection, I guess, and how starved we are. So the littlest crumbs, it's like this projection, and then the little crumbs, it's like an interesting phenomenon because there's just so much kind of mutual unreality happening. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it makes that Catfish show is so sad.
Yeah,
very sad.
Yeah.
There's one I'm remembering. I can't remember too much about it, but I know that the catfish ended up being this girl, this 7, who just used her her friend's photos to catfish this very meek 9. And then they meet, and it's the whole thing of oh, you're not Mary Jane or whoever you were supposed to be. And I remember this, it was like the response was so strange because it was just a typical 7 heart deadening thing.
Right.
Where a lot of the questions was like, well, why did you do this? If you're not this person, why have you been talking to me? And it was something crazy, like 2 years or something.
Wow.
Like, why have you been talking to me for the past 2 years? And she's like, I was just bored and you were always available. And it was basically just like, well, that's the front of it, right? The 7, of course, on the front end is saying like, oh, I was bored. I don't really care that this is like about to end now because I've been discovered. But you could tell behind her voice and like behind her, I don't know, just like facade. That one, she's actually sad to have lost the connection now because she's revealed herself. And 2, this wasn't out of boredom. Like maybe it started that way, but it became like a secret access to your own revealing that you didn't really have to face because it wasn't in reality. Something like that. I'm just remembering that one. Thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, like how badly people want to reveal themselves is another aspect of it. Like,
yeah, like all the time in the show. I used to watch it when I was in like, I can't remember when this came out, but there was like a time it was always on. Yeah, a big component is that they will say, I've never said that to anyone. Never said this to anyone.
Right.
You're the person I can tell I can be the most myself with. I've never said this to anyone in my life. So yeah, I do think that like people on a social level really do just want to be revealing to someone, something, I guess. And I wonder how much this relates also into this like new phenomenon where people are falling in love with their chat bot thing.
Oh,
no, they're like AI conversationalists.
What?
Yeah, people are like straight up falling in love with their AI that they absolutely programmed to speak to them in a certain way, and now they're like,
Wait,
married.
what?
We're getting married.
a full her moment.
I have to
I'm a
process
program
that.
Alexandra created.
I have to
That's
process
true.
what you just said. That's crazy.
Alexandra is just a John program.
I couldn't even watch that movie Her because I knew that I was going to be pissed.
Yeah, it's
watching
exactly
somebody
that phenomenon.
fall in love with a computer program. Like you could go experience this with a real human and have drama and all this stupid stuff, but you're having a full-on relationship with a fucking computer.
Nobody better invite Emeka to an AI wedding. He'll be so upset.
He'll be so upset. Yeah, I even saw it was like some dumb Facebook article or some dumb news source that's like not credible at all. But it did say something like some girl tries to marry her AI, and of course it's not like legally recognized, but she like had a full ceremony to like marry her.
Get the fuck
AI.
out of here. Get out. No way.
So I think AI is the new catfish, I think
Did
it's-
you just read a bunch of like clickbait articles and like that's real?
I'm having a hard time believing this.
I mean,
I'll
maybe
t-
it's not real, but it is. I think it's plausible just seeing how easily the catfishing worked. Maybe if you go into it fully knowing, you like full eyes open, it can still happen.
I got to look into that now because
I-
I'm having a hard time believing that.
But back to Alexandra's point, like that she made early on about like the parental love and like kind of the lack of it, creating this void of emotional skill and awareness and whatever. Like, because I was thinking about myself, like I had really good friendships growing up. Like I like surprisingly, especially the more I learn about other people's friendships, like very like intimate and real friendships, like Colleen and Mary and stuff. And but on the other hand, like I had such a drastic low self-esteem and like sense of being unattractive and like unwantable in a sexual instinct way that like a little bit came my way and I was like, oh, this must be really special.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's like an interesting, like I guess I'm tying it into like instinct and I don't know, something about like the kinds of fears and scarcities around them. But there's something there about like what we're vulnerable to.
Yeah.
Like I think that maybe it's a combination of like object relation and instinct or something. But there's like I think all of us can be vulnerable to the wrong buttons being pressed, especially given our parental woundings. Like I my baby sister was just in town who listens to this podcast, which is pretty funny.
Hi,
I'm sort of
Lucy.
shy. Yeah, she gave some pretty good feedback where she said that that even though she knows the Enneagram really well, that often we just like go hard into deep, complex jargon, and so maybe we could put a little more setup. So I was like, that's pretty fair feedback.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's very consistent feedback
Yeah.
that we get.
That's yeah.
Anyway, we were talking about the effect of growing up with my mom, who has some diagnosed mental illness, and how that kind of distorted our like emotional repertoire, emotional palette, or something. There was like certain things that were just like so like missing in that like kind of love bond way. That I don't know. It's like it created certain blind spots or certain vulnerabilities or something, and so that's like kind of a there's feel like there's a lot there to like map or like get the contours over the flavors of how we're all kind of there's something that we're all vulnerable to, I think.
Yeah, that was an important thing that when I was going through my last breakup that you and David landed on for me in terms of what I'm vulnerable to.
Yeah.
Needs that I haven't fulfilled for myself is this gaping hole that if the right person comes along and presents themselves as nurturing those holes and wounds or whatever, that I'm more likely to experience an overwhelming attraction or need to get close to this person. And just to identify, like, okay, like social blind, I'm not seeing myself. And so someone who can show up and mirror certain parts of me that I have not been able to mirror myself, that's an open door for me to be really vulnerable to something. And so, just I see like this catfish thing being like, I guess we're all vulnerable to something like that, where you do have some vulnerable avenue that someone can get into that you're not even aware of, that if it happens, then you're going to fall really hard. And so, I mean, that was a big thing that I had to process. It's like, man, I fell really hard. And it's not even necessarily about that person. It's about what they represented for me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, that's good to remember, like that whole figuring that thing out piece, because I mean, like all right, like being an 8, right? Like 8 gets this reputation of not having any vulnerabilities or doorways, right? And then having like actually a big one, and like how does that work in with your 8 structure? I don't know. That's like an important thing to remember, and I bet there's a lot of stuff we could get from kind of that neighborhood of things, right? Like how like one other piece of that is being able to like having a recipient of your rejection offering.
Yes.
Like, like that's like candy, right? Like, oh, I can like someone needs my help,
right?
Whatever. Yeah.
There's a combination of externalizing heart space, and so there's like, if your partner becomes this never-ending project, then and they're also kind of like pulling on your heartstrings, if they're the vulnerable one, so it becomes this immediate like, oh, this is like immediately a link, like we are locked into each other, and we have like we have very important roles to play in each other's lives. And so that is on the flip side, that can be really toxic. You don't want to be needed. I don't want to be needed to that degree, but it's an immediate magnet. It's an immediate, I recognize that this is something that I have to watch out for, because you can easily fall into that dynamic. And then the other one is just the emotional vulnerability of someone who can represent like the external heart and can just embody the missing sort of heart space that I've got going on. And that creates another magnet. And then of course there's the social piece too, of someone who's like able to mirror. So just like looking at all these vulnerabilities, like, oh, like I'm having disproportionate reactions to certain things, and that's really clouding my judgment and ability to see who I'm really dealing with, because I'm getting high off of my own sort of certain needs being met. I've it's like it becomes a drug. It's like it becomes like I'm attracted to this person not because I'm actually attracted to them, but because it's some attachment to certain wounds, childhood wounds, or missing things that I didn't get as in my formative years and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I had to really examine that and look at like, how do I need to see myself. I need to be mirroring myself. I need to get into my heart space. I can't have that outsourced to my partner. I can't have somebody show up and they do this thing and all of a sudden I'm just like, I need more. That can't happen again.
I studied how Alexander's parents were fucked up for a year before I made my move.
Just swooped right in.
Alexander's been reading all
Snatched me up.
these love books, being a good social 9.
Love books. All right.
And
I love a love book.
I think that there's a lot of stuff we could actually unpack from some of these things. So I'm going to read one of them for something, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot there. I don't know, baby, if you had anything to add about that.
Not off the top of my head.
Are those like whole episodes probably?
Probably, yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Let me know what book it is that you're reading. Maybe I'll read a few chapters.
The one I just finished is that. I'm on a novel now, but
my mom had
Eric
a copy
Fromm
of that
is
book.
it's really, really good.
Yeah, he's good.
It's really good. It's really concise too. It's only like 120 pages.
Oh, that's
so I
not
think
bad.
you guys could.
I ordered it off of
Take it
ABE
on.
Books for $4.50.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's like it's cheap. That's the shipping plus 50 cents. So
Let me
Cool.
Art of Loving.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely rich material.
I think I read that about 30 years ago, but I don't remember any of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
what was the other love books you've been reading, baby?
I mean the other main one was all about love, which we talked about once.
Mm-hmm.
There's like some intermittent ones in between,
Is there
but those are the main two.
Is there a couple sentence synopsis you can do on Art of Loving?
Yeah, actually.
Sum it up for the
He
7
kind
fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he kind of poses that he shut up, David. Fucking snapping at me.
Chop chop.
His idea is that love is the longing to escape separation and return to union.
Mm.
Right.
You know, that our birth is basically just like a shock
Sure.
into separation.
Sure. Right.
And that we spend the rest of our lives
Yeah.
trying to seek union. And then he explores basically all the like fucked up ways that we're trying to do that. And instead of like giving a real, this is how you fix it, this is how you love it, this is like a spoiler, but not really. He says like you can't, it's not something you could dictate to people. You can't like tell someone how to love. You have to find your specific style, but here are components to love. Here are the different kinds, and here's like the bravery that you need to have in order to be engaged in it.
Do you get a sense of it? I mean, do you sort of pick up the accents of when he's sort of being typological? You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole part on I'd have to like find my book and see where it is, but there were definitely 3 main points that I read and was like, these are the instincts right here.
There
Like,
you go.
you know, that like sexual is obviously like the physical manifestation of like trying to achieve union again, and you get it for that one like orgiastic moment, and then you have to separate again. And that's, you know, that's obvious, but that's like the effort. Basically, the whole thing was like, or what I took from it is the Enneagram itself is us trying to find love again.
Yeah.
All of it. And I,
That's
of course,
interesting.
used to think that the bias was that like love belongs to the social instinct. And I still think it does.
Yeah.
But
Wrong.
it doesn't. But it doesn't, you know?
Oh, you wounded
My
us
ego, of course,
so
is
deeply.
like.
She's
But
trying
it
to find
doesn't.
proof in these books that it belongs to the social
Yeah.
instinct, and she's failing miserably.
But it was a cool explanation. There was even a part that I can't remember if I attribute it to attachment or social. It felt a little similar, but of course it will for me. But just like the phenomenon of trying to achieve union through sameness, through alignment.
Yeah.
and how that actually creates a lot more separation.
Right.
And that's another aspect of the book that I thought was really cool. It talks about all of these different efforts, the self-pres effort, the sexual effort, the social effort, and how we fail it and actually achieve more separation, which is what we're trying to escape.
Yeah, and part of why I was asking the question is just because I wondered if he just, unconsciously not knowing the Enneagram and of course and object relations and the correlation between the two, whether he might have, just whether the whole book is sort of unconsciously about attachment types. So
no, I didn't get that.
Okay.
It felt both above
Okay.
types and instincts and deeper than types and instincts at the
Right.
same time. And also this is kind of like a like a tonal thing. He's a critic of Freud's. Like a lot of his work is in response to reading Freud's
Probably
stuff.
Freud, yeah.
And I get confused with him and Jung sometimes. But anyway, in response to reading Freud's stuff and then being like, I don't know, I don't think that's really it. So a lot of this is like a response to Freud's work. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, part of my thesis with an instinct book is about how basically like we're born, we experience our essence or whatever love with our mother and union with our mother's body is the source of all instinctual regulation, and we associate regulation with love and essence. And then as we learn to self-regulate, those associations go on to instinctual resources in all three instincts. From a certain point of view, the instincts are ways that we're erroneously trying to get back to unity.
Right.
I think that'd be an interesting book. I should go get a copy of it.
Yeah, if y'all don't read it, I can just go through it and pull out like the main bullet points to talk about, because I do think it's
still read it
still
together. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be cool. All right, let's do that instead. Okay, yay!
Book
club.
Xandra's book club.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
here's this other thing, totally different subject, but something that might be fun to do for everybody. And I'll pay for it. I might have to convince you guys because you're going to think it's bullshit. But one thing I did in Finland that Callie Ornelas connected me to, didn't have anything to do with Finland, but is I got my Akashic records read.
Oh,
Interesting.
It's pretty fucking wild what came up there, and it'd be interesting. I mean, it'd be in a way it's more, I don't know, closer to home than say all that Michael teaching stuff, because it's but it's pretty wild because it gets into, see, this takes me on a whole other thing. And another thing I wanted to get you guys into, John, do you know this guy Billy Carson? He's like Graham Hancock.
No.
He's one that does all that. He's really deep into, and he's very convincing about all the shit with the alien influence on ancient civilizations. And he's very much like constantly giving you resources and backup data and stuff. And he's proved some things that now like NASA is in concurrence with about certain things around our solar system. He's a really sharp guy. Anyway, where was I going with that? Well, just that would be another interesting topic to get into, because then there's some stuff that relates to the instincts and the types and so forth, because he gets into like the aliens genetically modifying the whole human species. And like, so where I'm going with it is this, get this is the big vision here, is that the reason there's so many specifically like self-pres social 9s and 6s is because that's the slave genetics, right? That's the whole thing right there. I mean, it's the perfect design to have aliens being a slave mining, whatever population for their shit.
Damn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
here we go.
the attachment types are going to love that.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, let's go there. So it'll be a huge insult to many thousands of people. But here's the thing,
Millions
though.
of people.
But there's a punchline, which is the 9/7, everything's magical and wonderful, which is that that people are waking up to this, and this guy himself, Billy Carson, I've listened to now many hours of his shit. He's a self-bred social 6 himself, probably a Bermuda, but he's like, fully revealing this whole thing. And I think there is, I think it relates into, this is whatever, the whole, like, people realizing because of the COVID thing, just how vapid the whole office thing and all that shit is. So there is kind of a wake up from this whole slave mentality, but the reason that it's stuck for so long is because it is in the instincts, and it is in the 693 worker bee thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right,
guys.
Good night, y'all.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Deal.
Bye, guys.
Bye.